Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Johnson, and this is my value-added project presentation for AMGT 493. During the course of my internship, I actually completed 3 different value-added projects. The first of them being a new hire training plan for the commercial department, a Target grocery cart shipping process QS document, and an Excel document that is a Target cart component breakdown. The first value-added project that we're going to talk about is the new hire training plan for the commercial department. As you can see in my presentation, I've actually chosen to use the presentation, the PowerPoint that I've created specifically for the training plan. So while I'm talking about it, you can follow along and read and see exactly what I chose to include in the project. I've decided that a new hire training plan was necessary for a couple of different reasons. At the end of my first week at Transnav, the assistant manager, Nick Pamonte, asked me how I felt about the progress that I was making. And although things seemed to be going quite well, I kind of felt a little disconnected from the team for a couple of reasons. One of which being I really just wasn't sure what was next. There was never any fluid or structured training process in place, and most of the account managers really just didn't have the time to train me. So as I was explaining this to Nick, we both kind of simultaneously looked at each other and came up with the idea, well, maybe that could be your value-added project, is to actually create the new hire training plan so we have something structured to use in the future. So the PowerPoint that you're about to see contains all of the information that I came up with that I thought, as a new hire myself, might be useful for new hires coming in. Part of my new hire training plan was to, in detail, go over the capabilities that Transnav has. One of the things that I found myself doing of my own volition was actually going out and figuring out how the machinery worked almost on my own. There were some training modules that were available, but without first-hand experience looking at the machines, it's probably going to be difficult to correlate. You can understand from a video how a machine works, but until you see it in action, it's going to be difficult to convey to your customers what capabilities you have. So as you can see here on this slide, Transnav's capabilities, they have somewhere in the ballpark of around 90 injection presses at 3 or 4 different locations. That gives them a wide variety of presses available to press just about anything from small parts to front bumpers. A lot of what I saw there was proprietary information for some of the auto manufacturers. However, they worked with GM and Ford and Tesla and all these different companies. Transnav, especially their account managers, need to be aware of these capabilities because as new clients come in the door, you need to be able to describe in detail what you're capable of, what the presses are, what type of plastics you have available, and what type of secondary finishings you can offer. So in this in particular slide, we're talking about the different presses, where they're located, a little bit about the different types of tonnages that they offer, anywhere between 20 tons to 4,400 tons, which could be anywhere from something small like a plastic finishing pin for a dashboard or some type of fitting inside your car, all the way up to larger components like front or rear bumpers. I think they do interior pieces such as dashboards and center consoles. This information is definitely necessary to know as an account manager, and I found myself struggling to find this information. Like I said previously, a lot of the account managers were really busy. They didn't have time to answer a whole lot of questions, so it was up to my own creativity and decision-making skills to come up with something. As far as a new hire perspective-based, I said, okay, well, I know that these things are going to be necessary for me to know as part of the quoting process later on. How can I find this out and how can I convey it to new hires? The first day at any new job can be a little daunting. It's kind of up to you to come up with the correct questions to ask, especially in instances like Transnav where there wasn't any structured training plan in order. This in particular slide contains a lot of the information that you're going to need to know, especially things as far as technology needs. There's a specific contact within the company that has access to all of these things, and you have to ask her in order to get a computer, a mouse, a keyboard. I even went so far as to go back and ask her for a mouse pad. There's also information here for all covered. They had an external IT company, which I thought was a little strange. However, their external remote IT company, that number was very difficult to find. Most people had told me, oh, I remember when I first got hired, I had to, call all covered. It seems to be a ritual. Everybody has a problem with their computer the first couple of days. Well, that phone number I went out of my way to make sure that I took note of, and I put it in this new hire training plan so the new hire won't have to go out of their way to bother people or try to find it on their own. In addition, we'll go over this a little bit later in the presentation, but you'll see a link down at the bottom for a training checklist. That was also part of my new hire training plan. One of the things that I found was that there was no keeping tabs on the progress of the new hires. My managers would come back and ask almost on a daily basis, what did you complete today? What did you learn? Where were you during these times? And I told them, well, I took it upon myself. I saw that Nick was busy. I asked him if he had anything to do. He said no. So I went out in the shop and I learned, how the injection molds are constructed and maintained so I have a better grasp of how they operate. Things of that nature. I'll show you later on in the presentation that the new hire checklist that I've created contains everything from talking to HR about your W-4 forms to doing the Paulson training, which we'll go over here shortly. Every single little step that I could think of as a new hire that I went through during my short time there that somebody else is going to need to know. This checklist not only gives them the capability to stay on top of their own training, but they can have their manager or the manager that was in charge of the training sign off on it, and they can show unequivocally to their supervisor, I've completed these, on this date, this time, here's the signature of that supervisor. As far as a new hire training program goes, this was one of my favorite slides. I made this up just out of the clear blue sky and it turned out to be a great hit. One of the things that I noticed bringing in the interns is that majority of them really didn't have any account management experience. When you get brought into an interview or you're given a sheet that has a description of your job duties on it, that gives you an idea. But this introduction to position objectives meeting, this is actually a meeting where you sit down with your team lead or your assistant manager or whoever, your mentor, and you actually get a chance to ask questions. You get to ask questions about your clients, who you'll be working with, what type of work is involved, specifically what can I go out of my way to learn, or what do I already know that will fit into this role well. It's kind of an extension of the questions that your manager asked during your interview, except this is your turn to ask them questions. As an account manager at TransNav Inc., one of the most important tasks that you will have during the course of your training is Paulson injection molding training. These are CBT or computer-based training modules that are administered pretty much at your leisure or at your management's leisure. They contain very, very detailed, animated, interactive videos and instructions on how each press operates, and it contains information on press operators and their duties, how each of the pieces of equipment are maintained. It contains information on different types of plastics and their failures, such as flash. If you've ever looked at a piece of plastic before and you've noticed, oh, this piece of plastic is the general shape of the object, but there's a little bit of trim. There's pieces sticking out of the side here that maybe extra plastic got in between the mold. That's called flashing. You learn all about these different things, and this is the colloquially called bread and butter of this industry. These training modules would teach you every single detail that you need to know before you go on your tours with the management and before you actually get to see the presses operate. It will contain everything that you could possibly need. It says here, the knowledge gained during each module allows you to understand and reinforce concepts taught in the future. In addition to these training modules, you'll be going on several different types, or the new hire will be going on several different types of tours, and different types of things will be pointed out. We'll go over that momentarily. Once the Paulson injection training modules have been completed, one or more secondary tours will take place. During these tours, your supervisor or whoever is administering the tour is going to explain in great detail from their perspective what the roles are, how the presses operate, what each different type of plastic failure is, things that you're going to need to know in order to explain to your customer. I chose to include this in the new hire training PowerPoint for a couple of different reasons. Like a lot of the other subjects that we've gone over, I really didn't have a whole lot of a grasp on why I was being taken on 3, 4, 5 tours, and then, having that awkward time where you explain to your management, oh, sir, I appreciate the effort, I've been on a couple of tours, I don't want you to waste your time. Come to find out, this is actually vital. These different types of tours are given to you from different types of perspectives throughout the company. HR may give you a tour and say, these are the things to watch out for. These are the types of dangers that you could come in contact with during your time in the shop. Whereas the account management manager may say, when you come out here with a customer, these are the types of things that you want to point out in order to gain their confidence. This was definitely something I didn't understand, so I chose to include a slide explaining why that detailed facility tour, that third or fourth one, is occurring. That way you kind of don't make a fool of yourself, especially considering I had no account management experience. I was unfamiliar with this method of instruction. So, the culmination of everything that we've discussed so far actually coalesces to this final slide for the new hire training plan. The TransNav 101 course that I was designing was a course in which would be administered by either a mentor or probably Nick Pamonte. He usually administered the majority of the training. What I found was kind of interesting. The quoting process was extremely vital and extremely delicate. However, they really didn't offer any formal training in it like everything else. They kind of just dropped you in the fire and said, here, this is how we do it. Show me what you come up with when you're done. However, with the lack of instruction that was offered, I felt it vital to create a 101 course. This would not only give the students, aka the new employees, the ability to learn the quoting process in great deal without damaging their reputation to a client or possibly getting a quote wrong that would cost the company millions, but it would also give Nick and other management the ability to gauge the skill set of each of their new hires and kind of find deficiencies or find things that they're really good at and build on that. This was their opportunity to create a structured workforce where everybody was working on the same page. As we've discussed previously, I created a new hire checklist. As you can see here, this checklist will allow new hires and management to stay on top of training and make sure everything's being completed, let alone it being completed in a timely manner. So this checklist here contains everything from human resources with Natalie Zimbersky to introduction to position objectives meeting that we spoke about earlier, a whole bunch of the different types of tours, shadowing different company or different portions of the company, all the way down to the commercial team where you job shadow and go through the TransNav 101 course that we spoke about. Now, although I cannot show you any of the information that's on the TransNav 101 course because it's a proprietary quoting process, however, this QS document that I've created here, I can show you. After I completed my initial value-added project for the commercial team, operations and the shipping department also found out what I was doing and asked if I would create documents for them. During the course of my internship at TransNav, I was sent over to the shipping department for quite a while to learn their shipping process and see if I could, one, help improve things, and two, they were back-ordered quite a few components and wanted to see if I could help them catch up. This document that you see here is a 5-page, which I've included the other 2 pages on the next slide. This is a 5-page document with 14 different areas with 116 different steps. Their shipping process was extremely complicated. One of the reasons for that is they were using a very anachronistic software. Software was old and didn't operate very efficiently. It required you to ship components from one part of TransNav to the other in order to not create extra work for the accounting department. So in addition to those deficiencies, the process itself, the software, the arduous task of using the software was extremely detailed, as you can see. This right here was the culmination of probably about 3 weeks worth of work, and when I was done, we actually gave it a test run with one of the employees that was coming in to take my place. I was pleased with the results. I was able to hand this off to them, and they were able to complete the entire shipping process with very little instruction. And I think we only found about 2 or 3 questions or inconsistencies that needed to be corrected. The third and final value-added project that I completed was for the operations manager. As you can see here, this is an Excel document that contains a target cart components breakdown. One of the problems the operations department was running into was that as the company was growing extremely quickly, they kept hiring and hiring and hiring. Well, unfortunately, with their busy schedules and the ridiculous workload that everybody in that department had, they didn't have time to instruct every single new hire that came in where components were, what they looked like, what they did, what the part numbers were. It was just too much time to spend on such a small task. So what I was asked to do was create this 14 page, which I'm not going to include all of the pages, this is just an example. It was 14 pages of figuring out which components belong to each different type of target grocery cart, breaking the cart down, counting how many components belong to each structure, finding out their part numbers, and finding out the quantities. As you can see here, I was able to take all of these components, line them up, put them in Excel, and then add part numbers and locations, bin numbers, the quantity, and the overall kit part number that would be necessary in order to ship this component out. This was a great success as well. This was something that we were able to print out, hand to one of the younger guys, have them go out in the shop. They already knew exactly what component location was there. They pulled out the components. They were able to get this done. I think we saw a 30% time reduction in the time that it took to kit these components just based off of this one document. So this completes my list of value-added projects that I completed while I was at Transnav. This was a great experience, a great opportunity, and I actually really did feel like I left something behind that's going to benefit this company for years to come. The new hire training plan, I'm really excited about. I hope I do get some feedback on that eventually. I apologize that I'm unable to include the Transnav 101 information because that was fantastic. Like I said, it was a course in which it would teach the new hires coming in the quoting process, which was the primary skill that you needed in order to make sales. This was just a fantastic opportunity. Thank you very much for your time and have a wonderful day.